Hello and welcome to Clubland Conversations. Today we're here to talk about one of Clubland's biggest, Gatecrasher. From its humble beginnings in Birmingham, Gatecrasher grew into one of the world's biggest clubbing brands during the age of the Superclub. With its titanic venue, the Republic, Sheffield became a mecca for partygoers as the 90s hurtled towards the millennium. Gatecrasher's ascent coincided with the rising popularity of trance, as well as the rebirth of clubbing in the UK. We're here to talk about those days with John and Tom, where we'll be discussing CrasherKids, Mitsubishis, the infamous Don Valley Millennium Event disaster, and much, much more. As the Gatecrasher saying goes, it will always be with you. So thank you guys. Just to kick us off, how would you summarize the Gatecrasher experience to an 18-year-old clubber now who's just fresh onto the scene?
That's a tough one to start with. It's this can sound really cliche, but it's really rather difficult to put into words, isn't it, Tom?
I guess so. I mean, I used a word just a minute ago before we started recording, which I think is quite appropriate, though, which is intense.
Yeah.
I think like that. There's lots of things to say about Gatecrasher, but one thing that really always struck me right from the beginning was the intensity of the atmosphere there. How into it everyone was. It was like fever pitch from right up until closing time. It was it was an intense experience, I would say.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Very, very intense. How else? I think, again, as I was saying before the recording, maybe we didn't quite realise it at the time, but maybe I think subconsciously we probably did. I think we I think we probably subconsciously understood that it was, something that was like, it was pretty important. It kind of felt like we're doing something important, when we're there. I don't know about you, Tom, but I kind of felt like we were at the centre of the world at that time. That's how it felt. It felt like the entire world was revolving around what we were doing in that little space in Sheffield, or not so little.
Yeah, and in a way, you felt a real connection with everyone else that was there without ever having sort of met them or spoken to them before. Even if you're catching a glance from someone at the other side of the dance floor, and you kind of just putting that face to say, "Oh my God, this tune's amazing," and it was really easy to make connections with people. It was a real sort of, I don't know, sense of shared experience that I've rarely experienced. I've rarely felt elsewhere.
So, guys, can you just kick us off with a little bit about your sort of clubbing history, I guess, and I guess how you got to know each other?
Right. Okay. So I started going to Gatecrasher in about mid 1998. I was a student, Sheffield Uni at the time. I must have been first or second year student in '98. Second year student. In '98, and basically it's what one of my friends who he'd been out clubbing a lot in his school days. He grew up in Liverpool, whereas I went to school in Lincolnshire, and obviously there was not really that anything of that ilk to do, to say the least. I was a big indie kid at school, and so even to get to decent indie gigs, we always had to go to like Sheffield, Nottingham, London. But anyway. So, I'd just never been exposed to any sort of electronic music at all. But I'd always kind of, wondered, always thought the kind of must be a lot more to going out than either going to gigs, which I loved and still love doing to this day, or just like going out to like the pub, or or to like, local ritzy club, getting pissed and trying to look very, very badly with girls. It's just like, and getting told to get away with your tail between your legs. It's just like there has to be more to going out than this. So, but I was never particularly into electronic music at that point. So, I was into mostly indie music, and one mate's just like, look, come to Gatecrasher. I think you'll really, really like it, and I did really like it, and started going reasonably often. But it was kind of like that was when Gatecrasher was like a lot less trancey as such. I mean, trance was played there, but I think the spectrum music that was played there was a lot wider at the time. But it was when when the trance scene really exploded, probably at the end of '98, that I started going there regularly, and then through that, I met a group of friends who like actually in Gatecrasher were also university students through whom I met Tom as well. And actually these guys who I met there over 20 years ago, they're still my best mates now. We still hang out a lot, and we go away for weekends together with our kids, and we all know each other's wives, and some of the gang are people's wives as well, if that makes sense. And it's a pretty cool story, really. And Tom kind of turned up on the scene a couple of months after I did, so I'll hand over to Tom now.
Yeah, well, so like as I mentioned before, my clubbing history before Gatecrasher was I'd been a bit like John, an indie kid when I was a teenager and young adult, and at uni I was just starting to get into a bit more dance music and electronic music generally, but hadn't. My clubbing was really mostly just sort of student nights, and it was my best friend from home who was going up to Sheffield for another friend of ours from school who was at uni there. He'd been going to Gatecrasher and telling me how good it was, and sooner or later, it was sooner rather than later, I decided to go along with him. And yeah, the rest is history, really. At the time I was at uni in Birmingham, and what I used to do is come up on Saturday afternoon, get ready, go Gatecrasher, and in theory go home on Sunday afternoon when I was in a fit state again. In reality, like that, and that's how it began. And then the more I came up, I used to come up on Friday instead and have a night out with the guys in Sheffield before going there. And then Sunday afternoon sometimes wasn't so feasible because we fancied going to the pub on Sunday afternoon, and so I'd stay until Monday, and then sometimes Tuesday. And in the end, I'm sure on a couple of occasions I dragged my stay out in Sheffield so long that I just went to Gatecrasher the following Saturday as well and stayed up for over a week. And there was a period, despite being at uni in Birmingham, I was probably spending more time in Sheffield than I was in Birmingham.
Did you, in '98, when you guys were just transitioning from indie kids to electronic music fans, did you feel like this momentum building across the country in a way?
Yeah, I did, definitely. You noticed how much more dance music was in the charts all of a sudden, that I think before then had been a lot more underground and restricted to the rave scene, and it was really kind of breaking through much more consistently into the charts in the latter part of the 90s.
Yeah, I'd say dance music and trance, even though if there were radio versions with horrible vocals added, it was getting that exposure. I mean, because I was based in Sheffield, it was I didn't always have an idea as to what was going on in other cities, but I did go clubbing to other places. Whether it felt as intense in the other places as it did in Sheffield, I don't know. It really did feel like Sheffield was the centre of that sort of thing. And even though I suppose like Cream had kind of before Gatecrasher did, I went to Cream a couple of times, and it didn't quite have that intensity and atmosphere that Gatecrasher did. I don't know whether that was like because Cream had two main dance floors, didn't it? It had the courtyard and then the indoor bit as well. But Cream felt like a bit of a letdown for me.
Did you see Ogan though?
No, I saw Sasha. I went there specifically to see Sasha. Never saw.
I can't remember. There was a big coach trip organised from our halls in Birmingham to go to Cream once, and I went. And I think this was before the time that I started going to Gatecrasher. It was quite early on in my my clubbing life, if you like. And yeah, it didn't. I mean, I wasn't pulled in the same way that Gatecrasher did, for sure. Can't remember who was playing though.
By the time you guys, so we're going to hopefully talk a little bit soon about the CrasherKids and all of that. But by the time you came in '98, what was the dress code like? Because I read that in the early sort of '97, maybe '96 days, it was actually quite well dressed.
Yep,
was the code.
Yeah, it was. I mean, you had to wear proper shoes. I think they kind of got rid of that, which is ridiculous. We had
it was 8
hours in when shoes.
It was shoes was the hardest thing, because like you couldn't wear trainers, but you couldn't also there's no way you were going to wear shoes. And then it was the start. I mean, clubbing dress code changed a lot from sort of that late '90s onwards. These days, rightly so. You can go in your Adidas or whatever, and like shoes aren't a thing, which is, it's crazy that it was in the 90s anyway. But I remember it was like acupuncture trainers that you had to wear, or something kind of sort of like trainerish, but not like actual trainers, something comfortable, that didn't look like you'd bought them in Foot Locker.
Do you know what Jordan and I used to do in the early days, Tom? We used to take a bag in with trainers and sometimes shorts, and we used to like this. It used to get really hot in there, and so it used to get really hot in winter. And we basically would take a bag in, and it's fine. What's in there? Your coat. Okay, fine. He never really questioned what was in the bag. I mean, it could have been like train spotting. Really, it could have been 20 grand in cash in there. Obviously, not as we're students, but like still. And yeah, we'd like sometimes take trainers in or shorts and just change into shorts and trainers in the bogs. It's ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous.
That's brilliant.
Yeah, it was in the end of the days when you kind of shoes were an issue for the clubber. It soon wasn't anymore.
Did you notice then at that point when you were first going, those sort of individual people starting to sort of spike their hair in a certain way?
Yeah, and it's a good question. It's difficult to say though when the tipping point. Well, I reckon the tipping point. It was the first Van Dijk 6-hour set in summer '99. I think that's when I noticed that it tipped over from smart casual to proper club wear cyberdog type stuff. I think that might well have been the tipping point. But
I remember it being quite heavily cyber, even like the first time that I went. I remember the very first time I went was the only time I did anything to my hair. Everyone else was like, well, you kind of got to, haven't you? So I remember spiking my hair and trying to put some like fluorescent green into the tips of it, and it was a pathetic effort. It was a real half-assed attempt. It was the last time I ever did it. But definitely, even when the first time I went, there was that feeling that you kind of like, you can't just go in like normal gear. People, like CrasherKids, they're all like in cyber, and that's what you need to wear.
We'll move on to that in a little bit more detail in a moment. John, you mentioned about the Republic was a maze. How can you describe the layout? Because you said as well there's no dead spots. So how did that work?
Right. Okay. I'm exaggerating. There's no dead spots because there were some like back stairs and fire escapes where there were some dead spots. But I mean, in the main areas there were. I'm just trying to think. How. My brother actually, he described it as like a big adventure playground for adults, and I thought that was a really, really good description. Because it was you kind of had the main dance floor, and it's very obviously the main dance floor. You had the foyer area, and then there was the plasma lounge, which was like a small house room as well, and they were quite well defined areas. But to get in between these areas, there was just like this, this proper like maze of stairs, bridges, and to be honest, even when you've been going for a while, it was you could no, maybe not even been going for a while, but like you had to have like probably like 2, 3, 4 times you need to go there before you actually knew your way around. And it's full of nooks and crannies as well. There was this one place called it's basically on the top. There's a sweet shop at the top. It's a sweet shop that's it sold sweets and chips. Like, why anyone wants to buy chips at Gatecrasher, I've got no idea. But once I'm digressing here actually. That time, me and my brother bought some chips and started handing them out to the cyber kids on the dance floor. But anyway, so yeah, there was this one part, like it's right up in the eaves, shall we say, quite a long way from the main dance floor, and it was basically the cage. It was called.
Oh yeah, I remember the
cage. And a lot of like the cyber kids, they would just like come to Gatecrasher and just spend the entire night sitting in the cage. And the cage actually was one of the dead spots. You couldn't really hear the music in the cage, so it's where you go. Like I think it was officially the chill out area, but like basically it was just this cage where a lot of the cyber kids would go and just sit in the cage all night. So it wouldn't have mattered whether Judge Jules or Dave Pearce or I don't know Simon May or Terry Wogan were on the decks. To be honest, from what you could hear in the cage, but a lot of the cybers would just spend the whole night in the cage, which I found a little tricky to fathom, to be honest. But then they filled the cage in, didn't they? which I thought was really funny.
I remember it was the kind of the very much the CrasherKids HQ.
It was the CrasherKids HQ, because the sound system is basically. I think the sound system at Gatecrasher was probably better than anywhere, and including, I know, Space probably, but I still think, I mean, Space, it was like a lot bigger, and I still think like Space had some dead spots, and that was like what was the new place after God's Kitchen at Air, which again, like it was based like Air, it was, or was it Code? It was Air, wasn't it?
It was Air first, I think. God, I can't remember.
But anyway, like basically the design was like clearly based on the Republic, and they said they put in the same sound system, but still there were dead spots all over the dance floor. And whereas you did not get that at Gatecrasher, and I just think I think everywhere I've ever been clubbing, the sound system has. It sounds really nerdy now, doesn't it? But the quality of the sound, it was never quite what it was in Gatecrasher, and I'm guessing that must be a combination of the sound system, like the acoustics in there. Probably I know, so I'm not a sound engineer, but there was just something about it. There was just like literally no dead spots there. The sound is so crisp.
I mean, and not even just on the dance floor as well. I mean, as John knows, I was notorious for not really dancing all that much, but I used to. There was a spot that I used to sit on. There were stairs leading kind of from the entrance hall down to the main dance floor. And in the kind of with a walkway next to it, and in the little triangle between the stairs and the walkways was a big stack of speakers, and you kind of sit at the edge of the stairs. And I used to sit there for large swathes of the night, and you could hear everything perfectly, still chat to your mates. And then if things were really kicking off, or there was a tune that you really love, you were only a few paces away from the dance floor. And yeah, no, I agree that it just wasn't a dead spot anyway. You could hear the music even when you're sitting on the steps by the bar.
And how about the light shows? It seemed to me, videos that I've seen, because I never got the chance to get to the Republic before it burnt down, but the light shows looked incredible. Was that something that you could echo?
Oh yeah.
The lasers was something else.
Yeah,
it was all about the lasers.
It was, and again, yeah, you know, I've been to plenty of other venues with the lasers. The lasing terminals were good actually. They were a lot lower, weren't they? The lasing terminals.
Yeah, the problem with terminals is they're kind of sort of beaming you straight in the eye a little bit.
Yeah.
I prefer the Gatecrasher where you could just kind of reach up and like break the beam if you wanted to. There was one memory that I sometimes wonder if I was hallucinating, but I remember looking at the back wall once where the lasers were on, and they were playing like a cartoon in the lasers. Like they were projecting a like cartoon of a running elephant on the back wall. The only problem with that is that no one's corroborated that story, and so I'm not 100% convinced it actually happened.
There is. I certainly cannot corroborate that.
Yeah, we've all got a few of those stories, I think. Guys, what makes Gatecrasher unique then? Like, why? Because it sounds like at the period, so 98, 99, maybe 2000, it was the #1 place in the world for clubbing. Why was that?
I think the fact that it was open till 6 in the morning, where most places had closed between 3 and 4, made a massive difference, because it was probably the only club where the DJs could come on and do like a long set. I think that made a massive difference. You could actually, if you had 2 headlines after midnight, you still get like 2 3-hour sets and 2 proper 3-hour sets. You'd see. So I think the DJs could probably afford to take far more risks musically, and did. I think what a lot of DJs said, and speaking to DJs who played there, they said like they thought they could afford to take musical risks there because the crowd was like a lot more receptive at Gatecrasher than maybe it was at other places. So I think the fact that it was open until 6 in the morning, I think that made a massive difference as to first of all the number of headlines you get in one night, the kind of variety and diversity you get of artists who played, and also what the artists would be willing to do when they did play as well, because they had more time, to build a set and to experiment more musically.
Yeah, I think that's definitely right about the fact that you can get 2 big headliners in, whereas most other clubs you'd book 1 big headliner, and then it would be your residents and maybe sort of a slightly less high profile DJ. But Gatecrasher could afford to get 2, or as they often did, the Paul van Dyk 6-hour sets, which became legendary, that they kind of that huge musical journey that they could take you on.
So for everything you guys have said as well, it seems like Gatecrasher had a really loyal following. Was that the same with like the other big sort of UK super clubs, like you said, like Cream and that at the time? And was there like a friendly rivalry between sort of those groups, almost like a bit of a football thing?
I don't know, to be honest. It's a good question. I think there were certainly clubs. I think Sankey's had a very loyal following, didn't it? I think. I mean, I know that Cream certainly did, and Gatecrasher kind of like was the new kid on the block, kind of usurped Cream a little bit, didn't it? I think like a lot of the Cream regulars were probably still very loyal towards Cream, but it's we because or I certainly spent most of my time at Gatecrasher. It's a bit difficult to say. Why would it go anywhere else when I Gatecrasher Gatecrasher on the doorstep?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have as much experience as I do with Gatecrasher of a lot of the other clubs around at the time. The only one that I used to go to more regularly was God's Kitchen, because I was in Birmingham. So on the few weekends that I didn't end up in Sheffield, I used to drag some of my mates there. And I didn't go there often enough to get to know any of the other people there. So I don't know whether that's because I didn't go as often or because it wasn't the same faces all the time. It's kind of hard to say, but certainly in Gatecrasher, you like even after you've been like 3 or 4 times, you're bound to bump into someone that you've been chatting to the first time you went or the second time you went.
I mean, I remember talking to Max Graham in Ibiza, and he was just like, he was just like, seriously, there's no club in the world where the regular crowd are as regular and as fierce to the club as Gatecrasher, except he said possibly Twilo. But he said like even that it's debatable. He was just like, Gatecrasher is, and I mean Max Graham played like literally all 4 corners of the globe, and he said there's no place like Gatecrasher as far where the loyalty and the fact that you'll see the same face again and again. He said it's absolutely different league as far as that's concerned.
It must have made it so special. Were there any ever occasions where like some of your friends weren't going that weekend and you thought, you know what, I'm just going to go on my own because I'm going to bump into people I know?
I didn't do that, but I certainly could have gone down there on my own and seen met people that I knew. But I'd rather go down with. I mean, we had a huge group of friends. There's probably a good 15 at least of us who would go regularly, and so on any one night there was between 4 and 15 of that group there. So I could have gone on my own. I went to Orchis on my own once to see Fergie, and bumped into some people I knew from work. But yeah,
I was in a bit of a different situation. Going on my own to Gatecrasher would have been a bit of a stretch, not being in Sheffield. But that said, Sam and I did once. Sam was the friend who from school who kind of encouraged me to go there in the first place. We were at his house in Milton Keynes on one Saturday evening at a loose end and decided we were going to see if there was anything interesting in Northampton. Got halfway to Northampton and realised it was the same road that the M1 that would get us all the way to Sheffield, and just carried straight on up and went all the way straight to Gatecrasher without any of this lot. John and the Sheffield crew that we knew, having said that they were going, and in fact I don't think really any of them were there. We definitely bumped into people that we knew, but not like our usual group. Not on my own though. That would have been quite a 3-hour journey to go to a club on my own would have been a risk.
A fair point. Yeah. So in '98, John, you came, Tom, you came in early '99, didn't you? And John, you were there sort of mid to late '98.
Yes.
When you said it was taking off, so what made it take off, do you think, the whole scene at that moment?
Right, okay. Do we have anonymity here?
You can do if you want to, yeah.
What's he going to say?
Okay. I mean, I want... Obviously, the music is what I wanted to, what I think we all want to focus on. But we've got to be honest that it was the fact that the ecstasy suddenly got good again. I mean, that's like that you can't beat around the I'll finally beat around the bush, but you can't hide that. And with that, you know, trance became more popular because at the end of the day, I mean, was it the Chemical Brothers who said making good trance music it's the art of making people on ecstasy rush? And there was definitely a very, very marked difference between music when I first started going, when people were taking, I mean, like people were taking pills, but they weren't particularly, they didn't usually work most of the time. There were a lot of people taking speed, and a lot of people taking coke as well. And I think, you know, that was reflecting the music and the atmosphere. Yeah. But, you know, suddenly Mitsubishis and all manner of other very, very strong and very good ecstasy tablets appeared. And with that, you know, I think it changed the music, it changed the way that people dressed, it changed the atmosphere of the club. And so I don't really want to bang on about drugs because it's so cliche, but it is a you know, it's an inescapable part of club culture, isn't it?
Yeah, there's no denying that there's a close relationship between Gatecrasher trance and ecstasy. We wouldn't be the first to point it out. So that's definitely
it's not a very controversial viewpoint, is it?
But you know, beyond that, it's quite hard to pinpoint, because I think, as we were saying earlier, there was a growing surge of interest in dance music beyond like more underground scenes, and I think Gatecrasher was started to bubble that up to the surface even more. I remember I think it was around about the first time that I went, ATB till 9 p.m. till I come was #1 in the charts. Yeah. It was the first like trance tune, and the first time I went to Gatecrasher was, I think, just before it went to #1, and you heard it like 4 times in the night, and then it reached #1 in the charts just straight immediately afterwards, and I never heard it there again.
Thank God.
Well, but it was just part of that push of driving what is essentially quite clubbing orientated, like a very not very easily accessible music genre, is actually being pushed into the mainstream. And why that is, I can't tell you. Maybe it was just the quality of the music generally, you know.
Guys, I need to talk to you about the CyberKids, the CrasherKids. I need to know about, because we've had chats before, John. I need to know about the politics. I need to know where it all went wrong. I need to know about Judge Jules.
Right. Okay. Where did it all go wrong? Right. Okay.
Probably lay out your position, John, first.
So sorry. Say that again, Will.
You should probably lay out your position first on the CyberKids.
I've not got a problem with, or now, why should I have a problem with CyberKids now in 2022? I didn't have a problem with the CyberKids, but it got a bit ridiculous, to be honest. It got a bit ridiculous. Why Judge Jules had such a problem with them, I don't really know. What bothered me a little bit was, and obviously this doesn't apply to all the CyberKids, was that it seemed like a lot of them were not going to we're not going for the music. They were just going kind of to be seen there in the cyber gear, and for want of a better expression, to get as fucked as possible. And I don't know, it's as I say, I don't want to tar all the cybers with the same brush. You're probably going to get lots of angry emails from ex-cybers now, trying to find out who I am. But it did seem that some of them, and not all of them, were going just because it was they thought it would be cool to go to Gatecrasher and get dressed up in cyber, even though they didn't really have a clue what the music was about. And a lot of the cybers, they all, and there was kind of this divergence as well, because I think one of the reasons why Gatecrasher decided to go prog was because it was a very conscious decision that Rain made, and he didn't hide that at all, was because the cybers hated prog. And they even claimed, "Oh, Van Dyke's too proggy, I don't like him." It's just, really? 140 beats per minute is too proggy for you. Sasha's really boring. It's just like, right, okay, well, go home then if you think it's really boring. But yeah, Van Dyke's too proggy was a good one I heard. But they seem to want the music to be like harder, faster. And in the end, I think there was certainly a split when Insomniacs opened, and I think that was quite important. I think Insomniacs was, I think Insomniacs appeared for a number of reasons. Like, yeah, people wanted something to do after Gatecrasher. The only other option was Niche, which was dodgy, and people got murdered there on a semi-regular basis. So, you'd rather go to many places other than Niche. So, people wanted somewhere safe, with their sort of music to go to continue clubbing, and therefore Insomniacs was born. But Insomniacs was it was hard house, which is not my cup of tea, to be honest. But okay, a lot of people like it. But I think like a lot of the cybers, they kind of want it harder, and faster, and it's very hard. What I think was very hard, fast, unmelodic, soulless, empty, cold music. But they might say the same about techno. So it's a matter of personal taste, really. But anyway, I think it started going. I think Insomniacs, even though Insomniacs did very, very well for itself, and we can't slate them for that. I think when Insomniacs appeared, I think that was the first maybe toll of the death knell for Gatecrasher. And like a lot of the cybers then stopped going to Gatecrasher and just went to Insomniacs. Okay, that's fine. If they want to do that, that's completely up to them. But certainly, I think maybe the attendance at Gatecrasher starting to dwindle, maybe coincided with that. And also the other thing, and again, going back to drugs and things, which I didn't really want to, but I also believe that things started going wrong when with the rising popularity of ketamine. And I mean, it's I've nothing I've ever consumed, but I've seen people on it, and I've read about what the effects are, and kind of there's a complete discombobulation in my head between like the effects of ketamine and what you want to do at a club, and why anyone would actually want to take horse tranquilizer.
Well, especially with the music as intense and engaging as trance music was. It's not congruous.
Tom, could you explain to the listeners what is the cyber kid, for those who have no idea?
So well, your cyber kid classically would be wearing maybe a cycling tee, a tight-fitting cycling tee. I'll talk about the boys. It's easier to talk about them without sounding sexist. I don't know. They'd wear like a tight-fitting, maybe a cycling t-shirt or something bright and fluorescent, maybe with like a Hello Kitty logo, or I don't know. So that would be ideal. You'd have there was a shop in London called Cyberdog that sold it all manner of this kind of cyber gear, kind of futuristic. Future punk, I guess, is one way of describing the look. But like the classic cyber outfit would be fluorescent face paint in maybe dots around the eye, then hair spiked up and fluorescent, a dummy to suck that would like hang around the neck when they weren't sucking it.
Fridge magnet letters, pipe cleaners in the hair.
Yeah, pipe cleaners, another classic. Yeah. And like just kind of going back to the question originally about experience. I mean, I didn't really have any negative experience with cyber kids. There was they were kind of a bit of a clique, I suppose, but you get that in any social group. It didn't bother me in the least. I wasn't really I wasn't up for dressing up like that. It wasn't really what I was interested in going there for, so I didn't. I mean, you did kind of sometimes get a feel that some of them in the group might, I don't know, there was sometimes a vibe of a bit of attitude that like they were kind of the real core of Gatecrasher, and if you weren't cyber, like you weren't really kind of in the gang. But as John said, I think like that is definitely not the case for, I spoke to a lot of people there who dress up in cyber who were not like that at all. So it's not a generalization, but there was a little bit of that, like that feeling somewhere in the group. But as I say, a bit like it's a bit of a clique anyway. So that's kind of what happens.
Yeah, but whereas we look down on them because kind of they only knew what the big tunes were, whereas we recognise, the fillers that were getting played for the first time of White Label, and we'd found, at the bottom of a pile or back of a pile of records in some obscure record shop. So,
you guys were the anoraks.
we were definitely the anoraks. I'm still an anorak as far as music goes across a wide range of genres, electronic. And otherwise, and
it used to be a race to recognise the tune. The first, as soon as a new one was coming in, you'd be like, who could name it first?
Yeah. It got ridiculous. Or if it's new tunes, try and name who we thought the artist might be, due to what the kick drum sounded like. I mean, it was pretty nerdy. But yeah, that's cool. But I think you're right, Tom. I think that the Cybers kind of we thought that the Cybers felt like they owned the club, and we kind of thought that maybe they looked down on us, as non-Cybers, but then we thought we were cooler because we actually went there for the music, and wanted to hear, a lot of underground tunes rather than just, the same big tunes on rotation. So yeah, but yeah, I mean what was about the Cybers. So at first it was quite a small clique, and then they got bigger quite quickly. But then again, a real key moment in British clubbing history was when that famous or infamous issue of Music magazine got published with the feature on the Cybers, and they had interviews with some of them, and they basically became overnight celebrities. They
I remember
became two in particular. Are we allowed to mention names?
I mean, why not?
Rob Van Geek and UV Lee. I won't mention the real names, but I mean, they became celebrities just because they went to a club dressed in these outfits. But then, literally, the week after this magazine came out, about 10 people turned up dressed in the exact outfit that UV Lee had been wearing on the cover of the previous week's issue of Music magazine, which
didn't Lee, if I remember that, all of a sudden he started coming dressed in double denim, didn't he? He ditched the cyber gear as a result.
Yeah, quite soon after. Yeah, Lee did ditch the cyber gear, didn't he?
I'm sure I saw him in double denim.
That wouldn't surprise me. But I remember the week after the Music magazine came out. I don't know whether you were there, Tom, but basically I remember standing there with Phil, and was how many fake Lees are there in here? How many fake UV Lees? And then there were literally every 2 minutes, just is that Lee? Oh no, it's a guy dressed exactly like Lee who isn't Lee. And then I remember Phil coming back to the bike, you'll never guess what I've seen. I was he's going, I've seen a she Lee. I was like, what? I said, I've seen a Sheely. And it turned around, and basically there was a girl, but definitely a girl, quite a short, plump girl, considering Lee was about 6 foot tall, thin as a rake, dressed in UV Lee's outfit. Just this is I mean, it got well out of hand. I think it was that issue of Music magazine, which is, again, it was a seminal moment in British clubbing history. I don't think that's an exaggeration either. When the Cybers became mainstream, I think it was that issue of Music magazine that did it.
It's making me think of in Quadrophenia, Sting's character. He's like they go down to Brighton, all the mods, and he's like the king mod, and he's got the shiniest wheels, and everyone wants to be like him, and
spot on. Good analogy.
Yeah, and for the record, talking about CrasherKids and their attitude, I didn't know Lee well in any at all, but I never really got any of that kind of attitude from him. He always seemed quite friendly and chatty.
Great.
Yeah. I mean, Lee's a really nice guy. I think he just thought it was as ridiculous as everyone else did.
Yeah, well, as I say, hence if my memory's correct, it ditching the cyber and realizing it was ridiculous and just going in a different direction.
Yeah, one step ahead. Yeah, luckily we didn't get like 27 people in like double denim the week after. That would have been amazing.
Well, no, because I didn't feature in a music magazine wearing it. So.
Guys, if you could choose two, so from that golden era, like 98 to 2000, if you chose, I'm going to give you 2 tracks that you can choose. What would you? Your Desert Island Discs.
Only 2.
Only 2.
Oh my god.
Better than 1.
That's not fair. Oh yeah, it's better than 1. The thing is, I'll name this right. Okay, Push Universal Nation. Original mix. Ferry Course mix is awful. It's horrible. It's grating, and it's too fast. And I mean, like, it's Thankless Task remixing that tune, but he did a very bad job of it, even so. So I'll go first one. Definitely Push Universal Nation. Go on, Tom.
I'm going to stick Airwave by Rank 1 in. It just, when we go right back to the beginning, we were talking about intensity. I remember the intensity when that tune dropped, like it was like beyond anything.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, it got seriously and terribly overplayed.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's my favourite tune from the time, but like it really encapsulates the moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, again, like, I mean, Silence is a great tune, but that got really badly overplayed to the point that I don't particularly listen to it now. Whereas I actually listened to Rank 1 Airwave not that long ago, and it still gave me the shivers down my spine. Even though I don't think it's a particularly great piece of music, but it did the job, didn't it? It did the job, and then some on the dance floor. I think I mean Universal Nation definitely, because it's very
Universal Nation as well. What tune?
It's a very atypical trance tune, though, isn't it? It's not like the arrangement is not like typical trance tune. Really, it's not got a massive breakdown. I mean, like,
no, in a lot of ways, it's more like
it's
more like a techno tune, really.
Yeah, absolutely. But that, for me, especially like when the intro, when you hear the intro coming in, and then the kick drum comes in, that, and the dance floor would usually go dark, and then the kick drum would and the kick drum would come in, and that is like, it's even thinking about it, and I can still listen to Universal Nation. Universal Nation as well is one of the few electronic tunes that I knew and really enjoyed before I started going to Gatecrasher. And so the first time I heard it on the dance floor there, that was a pretty mind-blowing. And also the Universal Nation, I think it still sounds as fresh and original today as it did then. I think if Universal Nation never existed and then it got released today, I still think people would like go, wow, that is an awesome, like, amazing original tune. It's not remotely formulaic at all. So Tom, have you frozen? Or you just think, or you just in deep thought about your second tune?
No, I've got my second tune ready. I was waiting for you. So it's probably on the cheesier side as well, but it still gives me goosebumps. It's Skydive, Freefall.
Great record.
Yeah.
So as for my second one,
throwing it straight back. Do you want me to talk about Skydive for a little bit while you have a
yeah. Go on, Tom. So I know how much you love Skydive.
Yeah, I mean, I remember hearing it a fair bit at Gatecrasher, but it wasn't just at Gatecrasher. You heard it all over the place. There's just there's a sort of like this stabbing sound, like when it started to come in, and as soon as you heard that, like you just saw people like stand up and just like, I like Skydive, and like they'd march towards the dance floor. Certainly, I was in that bracket. Was
the original an instrumental, or was it always vocal?
Good question. I thought it was always vocal, but someone listening might prove me wrong. I first knew the vocal.
I'm pretty sure it was only a vocal, because I'm pretty sure Jan Johnson actually got a writing credit on it, which suggests the vocal wasn't added later. As for my second, I mean, Synesthesia, I think it's I think it's difficult to you can't.
The Thrill Seekers mix or Paul Van Dyke?
Well, I was going to say Synesthesia, Thrill Seekers mix is incredible. I think the Van Dyke mix is even better, actually. But he didn't really do too much apart from like kind of update it, like make it a bit more crisp. And so it just sounded better on the club sound system, which Van Dyke is an absolute, he's a genius at, making tunes sound amazing on a club sound system. So But the thing is, science these, it's kind of like it's every of my mates. It's probably most people's, like, if you ask everyone, science these would appear in most people's top like 3 to 5 tunes, and so it's kind of like the tune that if it came on along with Skydive actually. And yeah, I think Skydive. It's on the right side of cheese, but only just. But it's a great tune anyway.
Exactly. It's borderline.
Only borderline cheese, isn't it?
But it still gives me goosebumps. I swear.
Did you feel like more vocals were coming in as towards the millennium, as the things were getting really more popular in the charts? Were there more trance tracks with that vocal on, you reckon?
Yeah, there definitely were. I mean, I was notorious for not liking vocals. Certainly as a DJ, I almost never played tracks with vocals on, and more of the, like, a lot of the trance tracks with vocals on, I tended to find too cheesy. As we're saying, Skydive was just on the right line for me. But there was a lot of vocals in. And Paul van Dyk, remember, he came out to say that he didn't like vocals, which in an interview, which I think was probably he was misquoted, or at least out of context. But there was a lot of cheesy vocals around, and not all of the best tracks needed them, I think.
I mean, I think like a lot of tracks, like the radio edit's got a vocal put
on.
Oh
yeah, well, absolutely. I was going to say
horrible vocal. Whereas I think like the tunes that originally had a vocal and were built around the vocal tend to, I think they stood the test of time a lot better. So remember. I mean, it's a BT tune, isn't it? Van Dyke remixed it, Sasha remixed it, and I'm telling you, Remember's a phenomenal tune. But that was again.
If we're talking about BT as well, it's like such a beautiful vocal on an amazing tune.
Yeah, but I think BT. I mean, he's the closest that what you'll get to kind of like he's a modern day classical musician, isn't he? He's classically trained, and it's electronic, but it is classical music, and I'm assuming that it's technically very, very good. I mean, Ferry Corsten is a trained pianist as well, isn't he? He's a classically trained musician. But yeah, I think the ones that had the vocals tapped on afterwards. It always winds me up when I hear Tokka's Miracle, because I used to love Tokka Me by Fragma, and then the vocal I grate so horribly, and the original's amazing. It didn't need a vocal. I think that's why they made the money
in the charts. They need that hook, because they need people to remember what it is and be able to go to the shelves in Our Price or HMV or whatever was around at the time and go, oh, that's it, I'll buy it.
Yeah.
But Tokka Me they wouldn't have got, so they needed Miracle in there, so they stick a vocal hook on.
Yeah. Did you guys, so I know you did, John. Tom, did you end up going to the Millennium event at Don Valley?
Yes, I was there as well, yeah.
Great, we had a quick chat about this yesterday, John, didn't we? So
yeah,
I guess
Gatecrasher. I've never been more excited for an event in my life than I was before that. The hype and the build-up was like something else.
I can imagine, because clubbing in the UK is at its peak at this point, right? All up and down the country, all the clubs are just packed out. You come into one of the biggest New Year's Eve, the biggest New Year's Eve for probably ever. How did Gatecrasher set the scene, and what happened?
How did Gatecrasher set the scene, and what happened? Oh God. I've just thought of a brilliant analogy, actually, but is this podcast, is it deemed as being not suitable for kids, Will, or can anyone listen?
I think we've got past that point now. Yeah.
Right. Okay. I guess the way I would describe it is the way that you set it up in your head, the very first time you're going to have sex, and then like how it actually turns out. That was basically how Gatecrasher built this event up and what actually happened.
Yeah, I remember reading, we bought our tickets and they were fucking expensive. I remember they were like 120 quid, were they?
120 quid a whack.
Which at the time as a student was an enormous amount of money for a party that we were going to every week anyway.
Did your parents buy you one for Christmas, Tom? Like everyone's parents?
I can't remember how I probably put it into an overdraft that I ended up paying a fortune on. But I remember them the Blade sounded like this wonderland. Like, first of all of the DJs that they listed was like this is blowing my mind. And then, you know, like there's going to be so many cloakrooms, and the bars are going to be incredible. And
what about the biggest fun fair in the world?
Yeah, there's going to be like a huge fun fair.
Yeah, just didn't happen.
No, first of all, the queue to get in was abysmal, wasn't it? That took us so long that, like, I was so excited to see Sasha. So this was before my my trip back from Spain to see Sasha at Crasher, and so I was like so excited to see Sasha at the Millennium event. But we were in the queue for so long that we missed most of his first hour and got in. So he was playing for 2 hours, the second hour of which I think was live on Radio 1, and we only really got into the event just towards the end of that second hour, and still, you know, with our coats and trying to, like, well, are we going to go to the cloakroom? No, the queue for the cloakroom snaking around the entire arena, so probably not. So but I don't want to miss Sasha being in the queue. So yeah, from the start, it was a bit like, this isn't quite what we expected.
Yeah, I decided just going to get rid of my coats, like coats do my head in. So I went and got rid of my coat, got back, like, I was, where's Sasha? He's gone. He's on the plane to Twilo. You missed him. Sasha played really early because he had to get his plane to Twilo, didn't he, to play there.
Yeah,
so,
which was a shame.
So yeah, basically, like, we're stake around the outside. We heard Matt Hardwick's warm up from outside. Then, then we missed most of Sasha because he was on really early, and we're kind of just like queuing and getting our bearings. And then I can't remember who was on afterwards. And then there was no fun.
The crowning glory was the midnight moment. So, like, there'd been so much hype. Paul Van Dyke was playing his set up to midnight and beyond midnight, and there'd been a lot of hype around what he was going to play at midnight. He had been apparently composing his own tune for that moment, and then at like 3 minutes or 5 minutes to midnight, unbeknownst to 99% of the people in the arena, some idiot manages to break through the security guards at one of the huge pylons and climbs up to the right at the top of the tent. And they have to stop all of the music. Just literally, he was just playing the intro to his like midnight tune. Midnight had happened, I think, hadn't it, John?
It was just. Do you know what his midnight tune was, Tom?
No.
It was Come Together by Primal Scream.
Was it?
Yes, and it was great. And then I can't remember.
Did he ever play it? Is it like, can you actually listen to it anywhere ever?
I don't know, to be honest. So, but I think he played before midnight. So I know it's an awesome tune. It was really unexpected. I think it was a really clever thing for him to do. And then, like, the idea was it would count down. They'd then start banging trance out again. But obviously, it would be really interesting to hear recording again, wouldn't it? Basically, as like we count down to midnight. Yeah, everyone kind of realised that things were going a bit pear-shaped as this guy climbed at the top. I mean, I don't know what your first thought was, Tom, but mine was like, basically, he's just going to, like, he's a nutcase. He's going to kill himself and go down in history.
There was also a time, you know, there's like how big was it? 20,000 people were there. Everyone staring up at this guy who was running along like these pylons, like. Fuck knows how high it was, but you were just looking like in horror. It's like, God, if he falls, like, he's not surviving that. And selfishly you're thinking, well, that's the end of night, isn't it? We're all going home. It was horrible to watch. He's like, the security guard were trying to, like, they had to climb up to try and get him down, and they had to push him along. And in the end, he climbed right down the pylon into the DJ booth, didn't he?
Yeah, he climbed down by the DJ booth. Van Dyke went up, whacked him in the face, and then he got like ejected. It was absolutely, it was so weird. And so he was up there, but it seemed like ages. I bet it's probably about 5 minutes, but it seemed like an eternity, didn't it?
Yeah, it did. And I remember, not like, my girlfriend at the time wasn't able to look because she was convinced he was going to either jump or fall. You know, I think we all thought that.
I mean, it's looking back on it. I mean, like, it's a good story, but like, what a dick.
Yeah,
I've got to find that guy and get him on here.
I mean, I bumped into someone, or one of our group, I think, bumped into someone later on in the night who said that he jumped back over the fence, which was how he got in originally, and like 20 minutes after getting ejected, he was in anyway. That may be an urban myth, though.
Well, that usually it might be that's what people usually do if they got ejected from like the normal Gatecrasher. You had to try really hard to get thrown out of Gatecrasher, didn't you? Like, try really hard. I think like half they just paid the bouncers like tennis to let them back in, didn't they? So yeah, God, that was so. Yeah, there was the midnight moment. There was the bar ticket. So like they didn't take cash on the bar, but obviously they didn't take plastic in those days. So you had to buy a booklet of drinks vouchers, which came in like I don't know, £5 denominations, and the change came. You know, the drinks vouchers, the smallest amount you could buy was like, I don't know, 20 quid's worth or something, which meant like you couldn't actually buy water without getting like a massive. And once the night was over, your drinks vouchers were worthless. So I reckon they made so much money. It was a scam. It was an absolute scam. Like the drinks vouchers thing. I mean, I know I'm accused the bar ridiculous, so I didn't bother, to be honest. But that was a massive scam. The drinks voucher, like. Thing.
And I heard it was cold.
It was cold.
Yes, also. Yeah,
the sound system was awful.
Those of us who did manage to palm off our coats to some kind person in the coats queue, but didn't queue for them themselves, regretted it. Like it was really cold.
It was cold, and like the speakers like went wrong at about 3 a.m. So
there was like the second bank of speakers. So like behind the second bank, you basically couldn't hear anything. So you had to like pile forward to actually get a decent sound at all. Yeah,
and there was and by the end, like there was a delay, wasn't there? So like the speakers on the right were the speakers on the right were like about half a second behind the speakers on the left. So and then like I mean, Jules, I didn't remember him being that bad at the time. I think we're just glad that like kind of like the guy hadn't jumped and we could actually get on with things and like dance and keep warm. I mean, Jules plays some massive tunes, but like if you listen to Jules' Essential Mix, like it is ridiculous. I mean, the deck's jumping everywhere, which is probably not his fault. There's virtually no mixing there. Like he's just fading across because, like, obviously the equipment was like wrecked, and Jules was probably wrecked as well.
I wonder who was more wrecked.
And and then like John Kelly and Scott Bond came on late. I mean, Oki was quite good from what I remember. But then again, like, Oakenfold can't mix anyway, so you know, like what difference would it have made? And then when by the time that, I mean, John Kelly and Scott Bond, who were like known anyway for liking a drink, by the time they came on, I remember saying to Baz, just like when like you know John Kelly was just like he'd given up on mixing. I was like, what is going on, mate? Like you know what's John Kelly? And Baz just said, yeah, well, it's his millennium too. I was like, hang on, he's getting paid like £50 for this. But what I would say, the best part of the millennium, we had a house party on January the 1st, and it was basically, we should have just done that on like on January 31st. So the house party was about like a million trillion times better than.
But you know, if you hadn't gone and it was the best night ever.
Yeah, that's right. If we hadn't have gone, we'd have made it for everyone.
I think it was never going to be the best night ever, was it? Because like you know, when these things are built up, and you know, logistically, I think they're just bitten off more than they could chew. But I'm glad that we went, just because you know, there's so many stories that we got about like the massive disorganization, and it was almost so bad it was good, you know.
I was reading a book from the Mixmag editor that died recently, Dom Phillips.
Dom Phillips died.
Oh, did you see the story of in Brazil, those journalists that got murdered?
Oh,
he was one of them.
Oh God, yeah, yes. God, I hadn't made the connection. Of course.
Yeah, so he was saying his story about Superstar DJ. He was saying like that was because it wasn't just Gatecrasher, I believe. Like Ministry of Sound was half full. Some other clubs, like I think maybe it was Digweed or Sasha, someone's had a burst tire at some point and they couldn't make their gig. Like it was all a bit of a disaster everywhere. And And he was saying that it was kind of that build up of that golden age, and it was almost like a bubble bursting at that point.
The beginning of the end, maybe. Never quite the same ever after.
Yeah, because it was, it was a bit of a sellout moment for everyone, right? And everyone was feeling a bit cheated in terms of their money.
I think they were, and I think like it kind of turned Gatecrasher as the brand or the company. It turned a lot of people against Gatecrasher, and they kind of saw it, a lot more as like a money-making vehicle than, a true, a company that brought
like a community.
Community, or like cutting edge music. They kind of just associated it with overblown money-making scheme. But I would still say that, Gatecrasher, the club, the normal club lights in 2000, 2001 were no worse than what they were before.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like,
it was still amazing.
I think there is some truth into that idea that it was the beginning of the end, but it wasn't a quick death, if that's the case.
Well, I just wanted to briefly mention from 2000 onwards, really, because you guys were still there. So in 2000, Mixmag said that, they declared that trance was dead, and that Hard House was now the new king. You mentioned about the musical change at Gatecrasher. So, and then you saw the Cyber Kids moving to Insomniacs. I guess some of them were going to Sunday Central at that point as well, because that was a bit harder, wasn't it?
Yeah, very much harder.
Yeah. But I mean, people have been going to Sunday Central for a long time, haven't they? And even I think, I'd say musically, I mean, I went to Sunday Central in Ibiza. I never went to Sunday Central in the UK, but I think Sunday Central was something kind of between the trance of Gatecrasher and the absolute, and something like Trade, which was, a very, very, very hard house. No, you did get a lot of people who, and even like nutcases, who would go pretty much like, why are you leaving Crasher at like 5? Why are you leaving? It's only 4 o'clock. Oh, I've got to get to Sunday Central. So right, okay, lucky you. Yeah.
I think there was definitely over that time a growth in popularity on Hard House. I knew about Sunday Central. Well, having been at uni in Birmingham, Sunday Central was. I knew about Sunday Central as long as I knew about Gatecrasher, but it seemed like there were more Hard House nights popping up all over the place at that time, and I think there was an increase in popularity. The problem, it was never my thing, like it wasn't John's. I was already, trance was a bit too hard for me. I was more into prog and that end of the spectrum. So Hard House was definitely out of the question for me. Like when Gatecrasher got too hard, I've found Judge Jules too hard for me most of the time. I wasn't a fan of his at all. So I was never really going to any of the Hard House nights, but there's definitely a lot more of them around from 2000 onwards.
Yeah, and it seemed to be. I mean, considering like our relative age now, it seems to be the younger crowd. I mean, we're all very young at the time, but it seems to be the much younger crowds who were into Hard House, because we were kind of. I mean, how old are we? Like we were in late teens, early 20s, really, like early 20s at that time. And the Hard House clubs seemed to be populated, the 16, 17, 18-year-olds, didn't they?
Yeah,
it was them. It was that crowd who seemed to leave Gatecrasher, whereas our mini demographic, should I say, we kind of stayed with Gatecrasher, didn't we?
Yeah.
So did you feel like the attendance started to reduce at that time?
Yes, I'd say. Well, as I was saying earlier, I think like the opening of Insomniacs, where people didn't have to go to Sunday Central. They kind of had this club there around the corner, and a lot of them at first they would go from Crasher to straight to Insomniacs. Then a lot of them just started going to Insomniacs without really bothering with Gatecrasher. So yeah, I think it's probably around late 2000, early 2001 where I think Gatecrasher, as far as attendance would go, it definitely reached and passed its peak. Would you agree, Tom?
Well, the problem for me is that coincides with me leaving to live in Spain, so my attendance dropped a lot. So I saw it a lot less. You're in a better position to talk about that, John. Really?
Yeah, certainly after probably the end of 2000, start 2001, unless it was like a huge, unless it was Van Dijk or Sasha, you wouldn't have the queues round the entire the outside of the club for a run of the mill.
I do remember that when I did go back, that the queues didn't seem to be as long as often. Whereas when I first started going, it was you got there early because otherwise the queue would be a nightmare. In that era when you used to go back, that wasn't so much of a concern.
Yeah,
you could rock up at 1 a.m. or midnight and it wouldn't be an issue.
Yeah.
Did you feel a general decline in clubbing, in general, sort of like 02, 03? From what I understand, that's when it sort of really slipping back into the underground.
I mean, 03, I left the UK, so it's a bit difficult for me.
Well, whereas I came back to the UK a little bit later than that, and was then going out a lot in London. I probably have a distorted view because I was doing a lot. I was going out a lot at that time, like every weekend, couple of nights a weekend, DJing a lot, and I still saw a lot, but what it was noticeable, I mean, aside from a few big clubs in London, notably, Fabric and The End, and Turnmills was still going strong, and Ministry of Sound. Aside from those few, it's a lot more smaller venues, and it didn't feel like there were quite as many super clubs around, for sure. I think there was a move gradually to, unfortunately, you've seen just pretty much the only one of the clubs in London that I've just mentioned, or the only two, sorry, that are still open are Ministry of Sound and Fabric. All of the rest of them have closed, and there was a slow move away from that kind of super club, or even just the big clubs, to smaller venues.
Yeah, and I think that probably coincides with the death of trance, because trance, it's a whereas I think like techno, it can techno works very well. I mean, it works very well in a super club, but it also works very, very well, in a small, sweaty venue with a capacity of 300. Trance doesn't. Trance lends itself to a big venue. It's big music for a big scale, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's like those festival scene, those festival moments, like if you think about who the biggest, who was still flying the flag of trance really above and beyond, and those guys and Juno, and that's all big, isn't it?
Yeah, above and beyond. Armin, Tiesto. I mean, it was interesting how Above and Beyond kind of like took over the trance world when Above and Beyond do basically, in my opinion, I mean, I like Above and Beyond. I like a lot of the tunes, but in my opinion, like Above and Beyond, they kind of just like copied something that Van Dijk had been doing several years earlier. They just copied him very, very well.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so I guess there was a general decline then, and almost like, I guess you got that peak of 2000 where the public interest in your average person who was kind of getting roped into clubbing, and then by 2 years later they've moved on, I guess.
Well, yeah, and I guess we all moved on as well. We kind of once you've got a serious job, then going clubbing every weekend, it's just, they just don't go together, do they? Serious jobs and like serious clubbing.
I gave it a good go for a while in London. It was, but certainly not getting promotions. Like by the time I wanted those, I had to knock it on the head a bit.
Yeah, or having a family as well.
Well,
well, I know. Okay, having kids and clubbing, they do not go together at all.
Final two questions for you guys. Just wanted to give a shout out to the residents of Crasher, and what energy did they bring during your time?
I mean, I think actually it's probably something we should have mentioned earlier. I think one of the reasons why Gatecrasher was so strong was that the resident DJs were, I mean, Scott and Matt, the original residents, like Scott and Matt Hardwick, they were Gatecrasher, and they knew. Yeah,
you knew that those two were relentlessly reliable. For certain.
Yeah, they knew the crowd inside out. Again, like they wouldn't just play cheese. They would actually, play a lot of underground tunes. They knew that was what the crowd wanted, and there were many nights at Gatecrasher where, up to 3 a.m. it had been a bit lame, or like someone who it didn't like was playing, or
then
so they disappointed.
But you knew, and took off again.
yeah, you knew that if Scott or Matt were in the last 2 or 3 hours, then that would be enough to rescue the night. And so yeah, I think the strength of the original 2 residents, Scott and Matt, was I mean Scott, it's a big good tune again. Like he used to, he used to get pretty drunk sometimes, did Scott, and his mixing used to suffer. But I think Scott Bond's skill that Scott Bond has got over and above many DJs. He just knew which tune to drop when. I think he could read the crowd. I mean, I don't think I ever saw Scott outside Gatecrasher, but I think Scott, he kind of just knew what was needed at what point. He could read the crowd incredibly. And Matt Hardwick as well. I mean, Matt Hardwick, I think he's like technically a brilliant DJ. I think like his mixing's phenomenal. And again, Matt could pick a tune, but again, they were not afraid to play like pretty underground stuff. But I think they also knew when maybe there was a bit of a lull because there'd been someone playing before who didn't quite get it, or the crowd didn't quite get them, and they just knew how to pick it up. And literally, like I remember, on more than one occasion, Scott or Matt would come on, and it would be not one of the best nights there, and within like 2 or 3 tunes, like you'd forgotten about Sonic's dreadful set beforehand.
Tom, who was your favourite like external DJ that would come in quite often?
No question on that. It would be Paul Van Dyke. His 6-hour sets was a monthly. It was, I guess you could call it a residency really, because it was like monthly. He did a 6-hour set, but
no, it was bi-monthly. It was about six a year at the peak.
So it's a loose residency, but he wasn't really a true resident. And they were always just amazing.
Yeah, and it was the only place in the world at that point where he was doing 6-hour sets, or so he claimed anyway, or that was what Gatecrasher told us. Yeah. But he told us a lot of things. He was very fun fair at Millennium.
He was very anti drugs, wasn't he? And which is interesting with those CrasherKids.
Yeah, I remember him getting on the mic at the end of one of his 6-hour sets, which was not something I like from any DJ. But he got on the mic once to say that he, you could have fun without drugs.
Did he?
Yeah, yeah, he did. He definitely got.
I don't remember this, Tom. Is this from the same rack as your elephants on the back wall?
No comment.
I do not remember this at all.
I'm sure it happened. This one I'm confident of.
Right. Okay. Yeah. I mean, Van Dyke, he claimed he did claim, and he was quite like openly anti-drugs. What he did behind closed doors, of course, I don't really know. And whether this was like the true situation, I've got no idea.
Final question then, guys. What would be if you could choose like one favorite memory of the whole time that you were there? Was there anything, a specific moment?
Will, to bring you in on this anecdote. So in sort of late 2000, I'd for uni was on a year abroad in Spain, and since I'd been going to Gatecrasher, I'd like completely fallen in love with Sasha. I was more probably into like the progressive scene than I was trance, and Sasha was like a god to me. I hadn't seen him at Gatecrasher, and he came up on the listings while I was in Spain. I was gutted. I was like, I can't believe it. I'm not going to be there. So I made a decision to fly over from Spain just for that one night, and didn't tell any of the guys. There was just another guy from the group also called Tom who picked me up I flew into Liverpool and got the train to Sheffield, and he came and picked me up from Sheffield station. We went pretty much straight to Gatecrasher, and I just sort of wandered up to the group as if nothing had happened. They were like, what the hell are you doing here?
The thing is, Tom had been telling us, there's a massive surprise for everyone tonight. Massive. So we'll start. I think we had no idea. We're just like, is Van Dyke playing as well? And he's just like, I can't tell you anything. And like, so we were all absolutely convinced that like Van Dyke was doing the last hour. And so basically,
must have been a huge disappointment when I told
when you said that, is that no? Obviously, like we were well pleased to see it. After the initial disappointment that it wasn't Van Dyke had worn off, obviously. I mean, there's loads of really cool memories. Like, one night when it had been like a bit of a rubbish night, and we didn't know what was going. And then Scott Bond suddenly appeared at 4 a.m. But we were about to go home, and Scott appeared in a pair of shades, and he wasn't even on the billing. That's right, Scott appeared, and we was like, "Oh, what's going on now? Like, is actually anyone going to play? Are they just going to send us home?" Scott Bond like appeared in a pair of shades, and the whole place went mentally before he dropped his first tune. I think it was when Eric Murillo was playing or something. Which Eric Murillo was a great DJ and like a sex offender, but like we best not go into that. But yeah, his music was not really. It wasn't really Crash music. But yeah, Scott appearing. But,
so I think probably what I'd pick would be that time I was talking about earlier when I flew back from Spain for Sasha. Is that moment walking into the club, having kind of flown all the way from Spain, and all of my mates are there, and they didn't even know I was coming, and they were, yeah, that was a really special moment. Just knowing you're going to have an amazing night, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that was that was really, really cool. I remember that well. But actually, my favorite moment at Gatecrasher, which won't mean anything to anybody at all, except to you, Tom, was when and there were quite a few of us there, and we'd had a really, really good night there. And a couple of our usual gang, it was my brother and another one of our mates. He said they couldn't come because they didn't have enough money, and we'd like, because we were students, we'd like said, "Oh, we'll lend you the money." Said, no, we're not coming. And it was about 5 to 6 in the morning, and I don't know whether you were there, Tom, or not. It's 5 to 6 in the morning, and suddenly my brother and our mate basically just appeared on the dance floor. One of them had a pair of laser shades on. The other one was wearing a Reebok manager's jacket and had a bottle of Jack Daniels in his hand. And like, basically, what they'd done, they'd come down at 3 o'clock, tried to get in, and spent the next 3 hours trying to blag the bouncers to let them in. They were having none of it, and in the end, they let them in for the last 5 minutes. But it was absolutely amazing because it was so unexpected. They said he weren't coming, and we thought we weren't going to see him, and yeah, it was only for the last 5 minutes. So they actually come down, spent like 2.5 hours outside, got in for like 5 minutes, and then like came back with us in a taxi. But it was absolutely hilarious, and like it was so. I see these two guys, these like football manager jackets, a bottle of Jack Daniels on like the Gatecrasher dance floor. That's one of my favorite memories. But say it's probably not going to mean anything to anyone except our group of friends. But maybe actually that does encapsulate Gatecrasher, because it's kind of, it is about, you know, not just the music, but you know, your gang of friends that you're with. I think that's a huge part of it as well. And so them turning up even for 5 minutes meant the world to all of us.
It shows, you know, 22 years later, 23 years later, and you two still know each other. And I guess you said there's more. Yeah, you're still in touch with others.
Oh yeah,
there's a big group of kind of like the core group that I got to know there. We're still, you know, still see each other or talk to each other loads. Yeah, still a good close group of friends.
Yeah, we do, and we don't see each other probably as often as we'd like, because you know we're spread about the UK and about the world in many cases. But you know, we still do get together from time to time, and you know we're always in touch on like on Facebook, and like we've got like WhatsApp chats, and you know it's and so you know the friendships. Yeah, we met through clubbing, but you know it endured a lot more than that. And you know we're still, you know, just as close. 25, nearly 25 years later as what we were then, which is awesome.
Yeah, beautiful memories, guys, and thank you for sharing all these memories with us. It's been really amazing to hear from you. Yeah,
no, thank you. It's been nice reminiscing.
Yeah, it's been great.